Tanzania has always stood out as one of East Africa's most peaceful and welcoming destinations, a country where travelers went to escape noise, politics, and chaos. But since the controversial election held on October 29th, everything has changed. The Tanzania people are living through a tension that refuses to fade, a mood that sits heavily in the streets, markets, and neighborhoods. And today, many are openly saying that this is not the best time for anyone to visit the country. Right after Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner with an overwhelming percentage, the nation did not celebrate. Instead, a wave of disbelief and outrage washed through major cities and small towns. Many Tanzanians felt that the election result did not reflect the true will of the people. Several key opposition figures were not allowed to compete, polling centers faced irregularities, and the final announcement came as a shock to a large portion of the population. It didn't take long for the tension to explode. Protests ignited like scattered fires across the country. Young people poured into the streets demanding answers, asking for transparency, and calling for a fair recount. But the response from security forces was swift and harsh. Tear gas drifted through neighborhoods. Rubber bullets echoed in the night. Armed officers flooded the streets, creating an atmosphere of intimidation. Arrests were made in large numbers, not just of protesters, but even of people suspected of simply supporting the opposition's message. In some regions, residents say the crackdown felt like a war zone. Families report that loved ones disappeared during the chaos, either detained without explanation or taken in the confusion of raids. Others claim the number of people injured or killed is far higher than what authorities have acknowledged. Human rights groups, churches, and community leaders have all expressed deep concern over the violence that unfolded and the lack of transparency that followed. Weeks later, even as the streets look calmer, the fear has not disappeared. Markets that used to burst with conversation now feel quieter. People choose their words carefully, looking around to make sure no one is listening. Political discussions are whispered, not spoken openly. The presence of security forces remains unusually heavy, especially in urban centers. Roadblocks appear without warning. Travelers who once felt free to explore now sense the tension that locals live with daily. The government has tried to reassure the public by establishing an inquiry commission, promising a detailed investigation into what really happened during the protests. But for many Tanzanians, trust in official processes has been badly damaged. They fear that the truth may never fully come out, and until it does, the emotional wounds left by the election will remain open. For anyone thinking of visiting Tanzania today, this is the reality. A nation outwardly beautiful, but inwardly unsettled. A country where people are still trying to recover from a political storm that shook their trust, their safety, and their sense of stability. The mood has not returned to normal. The smiles, though still present, feel heavier. And beneath the surface, many are simply waiting, watching, and hoping the situation doesn't escalate again. This is the atmosphere shaping Tanzania right now. And understanding this context is the first step in knowing why many say that this is not the ideal moment to travel there. The ripple effects of Tanzania's post-election crisis haven't stayed confined to political circles. They've hit travel and tourism in very concrete ways. For anyone thinking of visiting right now, the risk isn't just about ideology or protests. It's about safety, mobility, and uncertainty. First, travel through major hubs is fragile. Airports have been heavily disrupted. Flights were canceled or delayed as the chaos unfolded in big cities. Some tourists found themselves stranded, unable to leave, because of the tension and logistical breakdowns. Travel providers and airlines are still adjusting to the new normal, but the risk of further disruptions is real, as security remains tightened and the situation remains volatile. Then there's the curfew issue. Authorities imposed a curfew during the worst days of unrest, and while some of those restrictions have loosened, there is a lingering sense that curfews could return in certain hotspots if violence flares again. For a visitor, that means your plans could be upended. Night safaris, evening excursions, or late arrivals could become risky or simply not possible. Beyond movement, the internet blackout has transformed how people communicate inside Tanzania. During and after the election, connectivity dropped dramatically. Mobile data, social media platforms, and messaging apps became unreliable. For travelers, this is more than an inconvenience. It affects navigation, emergency calls, real-time communication, and the ability to get accurate, on-the-ground information. If something goes wrong, reaching help becomes more complicated. Security presence is heavier than usual. Reports from various urban areas describe soldiers and police conducting random checks, inspecting vehicles, and maintaining a noticeable presence in places where tourists might pass or gather. While many of these security measures may be intended to protect, they also create an atmosphere that feels tense and unpredictable. For a traveler, walking through a city with tanks, checkpoints, or armored vehicles in view is not the idyllic picture of African hospitality many imagine. Then there are the travel advisories. Several governments have urged their citizens to rethink or avoid non-essential travel to Tanzania. These alerts are not just symbolic. They reflect serious concerns about political instability, unpredictable protests, and potential threats to foreign visitors. Some advisories also mention broader risks such as crime and targeted violence. These warnings make many would-be travelers pause and ask whether their trip is worth the potential cost. Economically, Tanzania is feeling the strain, and the effects are being felt by both locals and visitors. The post-election disruption has hit transport networks, supply chains, and the flow of goods. Residents report issues with fuel shortages and difficulties in getting basic supplies. For tourists, this means that certain services, from transportation to food supply, may become less reliable or more expensive. The informal economy, in particular, which supports many small businesses, is under stress, meaning local guides, artisans, and hospitality workers are also navigating a deeply uncertain financial landscape. Finally, while tourism operators are trying to reassure visitors, there's a complicated divide between what's being said publicly and what's being felt locally. Some major tourism bodies insist that parks, lodges, and safari circuits remain open and safe. They emphasize that many of the unrest incidents are politically centered in cities and have not dragged tourism hotspots into direct conflict. However, for a conscientious traveler, the existence of these conflicting realities is enough to raise questions. Is it safe to walk the streets of Dar es Salaam at night? Can I be sure that a remote lodge truly lies outside the zones of tension? In short, the post-election instability has injected a level of risk into travel that many visitors may not fully appreciate. It's not just the beauty of the savannas or the allure of Zanzibar on the line. It's the very nature of trust, access, and safety. For travelers now, visiting Tanzania means doing more homework, anticipating disruption, and deciding whether the experience is worth the possible personal cost. As the dust continues to settle after the disputed election, one thing remains unmistakably clear. Not all parts of Tanzania are experiencing the situation the same way. The tension is concentrated in certain regions, and these areas have shaped much of the fear, confusion, and anxiety that travelers are responding to. The city of Dar es Salaam, being the political and economic heart of the country, has seen some of the most visible turbulence. Even though it's a major entry point for most tourists, the mood there has remained uneasy. Protests, clashes with security forces, and heavy police deployments have left many neighborhoods feeling unpredictable. Streets that once bustled with nightlife now grow quiet much earlier, with residents aware that gatherings can quickly be misinterpreted as political mobilization. For a foreign visitor, simply stepping out for an evening walk requires more thought and caution. In Arusha, a city famous for being the gateway to Tanzania's biggest safari destinations, the tension has been subtler but still noticeable. Reports from locals describe a feeling of nervousness, especially in areas where political support was strongly divided. Although safari parks themselves may be calm, the transit routes, the roads, towns, and service centers between destinations have seen heightened security checks. Travelers passing through could encounter officers questioning movement or inspecting vehicles. Even if these checks are routine, the presence alone creates a sense of uncertainty that many tourists aren't prepared to navigate. Coastal regions, including areas not far from Zanzibar's transport channels, have also experienced scattered unrest. While the island of Zanzibar tends to operate with some autonomy and has tried to maintain a peaceful environment for tourism, the mainland's instability still affects travel logistics. Changes in ferry schedules, roadblocks near ports, and delays in essential supplies have indirectly created complications for visitors trying to move between the island and the mainland. Another concern is how quickly things can change. In some regions, protests have erupted without warning, often triggered by rumors or new political statements. For someone visiting, unpredictability becomes a real problem. A road that's clear in the morning could be blocked by afternoon. A town that seems peaceful could see tension rise due to a single spark. That level of volatility makes planning difficult, and it's one of the main reasons travelers are postponing trips. Foreign missions and international organizations have not ignored this instability. Several have issued warnings urging citizens to avoid certain regions entirely due to the risk of clashes. These advisories are not meant to instill fear, but to recognize that movement around Tanzania, especially in the aftermath of the disputed election, isn't as smooth or safe as it used to be. The situation has shifted from predictable tourism to a landscape where caution must guide every decision. Even rural areas, known traditionally for peace and hospitality, have been affected in indirect ways. Supply shortages, fuel inconsistencies, and communication disruptions mean that facilities tourists rely on, lodges, transport services, local guides, are functioning under pressure. Visitors arriving with expectations of comfort and stability might instead encounter delays, scaled-down services, or uncertain arrangements. For many travelers, Tanzania has always been a place of breathtaking landscapes and warm cultural experiences. But in moments like this, even the most beautiful destinations are overshadowed by the reality of political tension and public unease. And that is the core reason many people are choosing to pause their travel plans. Not because Tanzania has lost its charm, but because the current environment makes it harder for visitors to feel confident, safe, and fully welcomed. Life in Tanzania has not returned to normal since the disputed election, and this is one of the most important things a visitor would immediately notice. Even in places that appear calm on the surface, the mood in the streets tells a different story, a tension that sits quietly between people, shaping how they move, how they talk, and how they interact with strangers. In the markets, where business usually thrives and people socialize freely, the energy has shifted. Vendors still show up, but conversations are hushed, and political topics are avoided entirely. Many people look over their shoulders before speaking, unsure who might be listening or how their words might be interpreted in this sensitive climate. A visitor walking through these areas would sense that the usual warmth of public spaces has been replaced by caution. Smiles feel shorter, greetings less relaxed, and people prefer to keep interactions brief. Transport has been another major indicator of the changed environment. Bus stations and major roads often have increased security presence, with checkpoints appearing unexpectedly. Some travelers have reported buses being stopped mid-route for inspections or delays caused by security blockades set up overnight. For tourists, this means that simple trips that normally run smoothly may involve long waits, sudden route changes, or moments of confusion when no one can clearly explain what caused the interruption. Shops and restaurants in urban centers sometimes close earlier than usual. Not because violence is happening everywhere, but because business owners prefer not to take risks in the evening. Rumors of unrest spread quickly, and even if nothing ends up happening, the fear is enough to influence how people schedule their days. A visitor trying to enjoy nightlife or late dinners would find that many places either shut their doors early or operate with minimal staff and limited offerings. Communication networks have also experienced disruptions. Although not always complete shutdowns, there have been times when internet speeds drop drastically, mobile networks feel unreliable, or certain social platforms become harder to access. Many residents believe this is connected to attempts to control the flow of political information. For tourists who rely on online maps, translation apps, ride services, or even simple messaging, these disruptions become more than just inconveniences. They affect the ability to move confidently and stay informed. In residential neighborhoods, families are living under a cloud of uncertainty. Parents warn their children not to stay out too late. Community meetings have become rare, and churches and mosques sometimes adjust their schedules depending on local tensions. Even weddings, Traditional gatherings and public celebrations are quieter, toned down by the sense that large gatherings may attract unwanted attention. This cautious mood influences how locals interact with visitors. People remain polite, but they avoid conversations that could lead to misunderstandings. Economically, prices of some essential goods have fluctuated as supply routes face interruptions. Fuel availability has been inconsistent in certain regions, affecting taxis, buses, and deliveries. For visitors, this unpredictability means that transport costs may suddenly rise, certain foods or supplies might be limited, and planned excursions could be affected without warning. Perhaps the most striking change is the emotional atmosphere. In many regions, there is a shared feeling that the country is still waiting for political clarity, for security updates, for the government's commission findings, for the next big announcement that could either calm the country or raise the temperature again. That feeling sits under every interaction, every movement, every decision people make. And a visitor can feel it immediately, like a quiet heaviness in the air. This is not the Tanzania most tourists imagine. The welcoming, vibrant, stable destination filled with adventure. The beauty of the country is still there, but right now, the spirit of everyday life is strained, and the uncertainty is something that even outsiders cannot escape. Tourism has always been one of Tanzania's strongest pillars, from the endless plains of Serengeti to the white sands of Zanzibar. But since the controversial election and the wave of post-election violence that followed, the entire tourism ecosystem has felt the shock. Visitors who once planned trips months in advance are now hesitating, canceling, or postponing their journeys, and those who arrive often find an experience far different from what they imagined. Tour operators, who usually operate with tight schedules and carefully coordinated itineraries, are struggling to maintain consistency. Some of the usual routes between parks, cities, and coastal areas have become unreliable because of surprise roadblocks, security checks, or sudden unrest in specific towns. This has forced many operators to reroute trips with little warning, leaving tourists confused and unsure about where they are headed next. Safaris, which rely heavily on timing and early morning drives, have experienced delays when guests or guides are held up by security inspections on the roads leading out of the big towns. Hotels and lodges have also reported a noticeable drop in bookings. Certain areas that are normally bustling at this time of year now have entire wings standing empty. While staff remain professional and welcoming, there is an undeniable strain behind the scenes. Some establishments are running with reduced staff because employees cannot easily travel from their homes due to the tense conditions. Others have cut operating hours, meaning guests may not have access to full services like they usually would. Travel agencies around the world have started issuing updated advisories. While not all warn against visiting Tanzania entirely, many recommend high caution, especially for travelers who are unfamiliar with the region. These advisories usually point to the unpredictable political situation, reports of increased protests, and the ongoing investigations into the post-election violence. Some agencies now require travelers to sign additional acknowledgement forms, confirming they understand the current instability before finalizing bookings. Airlines have not been spared from the uncertainty either. There haven't been widespread cancellations, but fluctuating passenger numbers have led some carriers to adjust flight frequencies. Visitors arriving in Tanzania may notice quieter airports, longer immigration checks, and officials appearing more alert than usual. Even something as simple as moving through customs can feel different, with officers taking extra precautions and questioning visitors more thoroughly about their purpose and areas of stay. Another major issue affecting tourism is the atmosphere surrounding major attractions. Parks and reserves are still operating, but the journey to reach them has become the real concern. Tourists who do make it to popular destinations sometimes mention an uneasy contrast: tranquil wildlife scenes interrupted by the tension they witnessed on the roads. Guides, who normally share stories freely, are now selective about what they discuss, avoiding political topics entirely for fear of misinterpretation. Zanzibar, usually seen as a safe escape from mainland issues, has also felt the ripple effects. While the island remains calmer, disruptions in mainland supply routes have affected goods coming into the island. Some resorts report shortages of certain imported foods, delayed shipments, and inconsistencies in transport between the island and the mainland. Tourists hoping for a smooth island experience may find occasional hiccups that remind them the country is going through a difficult moment. Perhaps the biggest factor keeping travelers away is uncertainty. No one knows how long the tensions will continue. The government's inquiry into the violence is ongoing. Opposition groups remain vocal, and citizens are still on edge. For visitors looking for a predictable, peaceful holiday experience, Tanzania simply isn't offering that assurance right now. The beauty of the country hasn't disappeared. The wildlife, the beaches, the landscapes, they remain breathtaking. But the environment surrounding them has shifted. And until the political climate stabilizes and the investigations bring clarity, tourism will continue to be overshadowed by caution, concern, and the lingering fear of unrest. The consequences of Tanzania's post-election unrest extend far beyond politics or tourism logistics. They touch the very core of daily life. Even months after the election, the emotional climate among the population remains fragile, and this tension inevitably affects anyone visiting the country. Travelers stepping into towns, villages, or cities may sense it immediately. A pervasive quietness, cautious smiles, and conversations that are measured and careful. Families that witnessed the violence firsthand are still grappling with trauma. Parents speak of children who are afraid to play outside as freely as they once did. Teachers recount students who are unusually withdrawn, and communities are collectively coping with grief from lost friends or neighbors. Rumors of disappearances, detentions, or injuries continue to circulate, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that makes social interactions more guarded. For a visitor, even simple greetings or casual questions can feel like they carry weight. Locals are careful not to reveal political sympathies or opinions to strangers. Social gatherings, once lively and vibrant, have been scaled down or postponed indefinitely in many areas. Weddings, community meetings, and cultural events now take on a muted tone. The fear of being perceived as politically aligned with one side or another has led many citizens to withdraw from public life. This quietness is noticeable to travelers who expect warmth and openness. Instead, they may encounter hesitation or cautious interactions that feel markedly different from the country's previous reputation for hospitality. The tension has also altered the way people interact with authority figures. Police, soldiers, and local officials are highly visible in urban centers. But even in small towns, residents often treat strangers with an extra layer of scrutiny, uncertain whether they might be associated with opposition activity or perceived as a reporter. For tourists, this means that ordinary interactions, buying a ticket, asking directions, or negotiating transport, can feel charged, as if every conversation carries the potential for misinterpretation. Business owners are similarly affected. Many shops and restaurants operate under the pressure of uncertainty, worried that sudden protests or unrest could disrupt their livelihood. Service staff may be polite, but interactions can feel rushed or distant, not out of unfriendliness but from a combination of stress, fear, and the emotional weight of recent events. Travelers often report noticing the fatigue and worry on the faces of locals, even in areas far from the cities where the violence was most pronounced. Mental health, an often overlooked aspect of post-conflict recovery, is also visible in subtle ways. Anxiety, mistrust, and hyper-awareness have become part of the day-to-day rhythm for many Tanzanians. The election may have ended, but the aftershocks persist, and for visitors, this affects the sense of safety and connection they might otherwise enjoy. What was once a carefree environment now requires awareness and sensitivity from anyone traveling through the country. For families and children who experienced the unrest, the scars are lasting. Schools have reopened, but curricula now include discussions about safety and caution that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Residents share stories of nights spent hiding from protests or witnessing confrontations firsthand. Even in seemingly peaceful areas, memories linger, influencing behaviors, decisions, and interactions with outsiders. Ultimately, this emotional climate creates a subtle but undeniable barrier between visitors and the people of Tanzania. It is not hostility, but wariness. Not rejection, but a collective caution born of trauma. Tourists may still admire the landscapes, the wildlife, and the culture, but they must navigate an environment where the country's heart is quietly recovering from recent turmoil. Understanding this emotional backdrop is crucial for anyone considering travel at this time, as it shapes not only what you see but how you experience the country and its people. The post-election violence in Tanzania has not gone unnoticed beyond the country's borders. International media, human rights organizations, and travel authorities have all highlighted the situation, and their reports have significantly influenced the perception of safety for visitors. For travelers planning a trip, understanding how the world views the current climate is just as important as knowing what is happening on the ground. Major international outlets have documented the unrest, focusing on the clashes between protesters and security forces, the arrests of opposition supporters, and the emotional toll on civilians. Reports describe the disproportionate response by authorities in certain areas, the imposition of curfews, and the lingering fear among ordinary citizens. For many viewers abroad, these accounts paint a picture of Tanzania as a country struggling to regain normalcy, a reality that is difficult to reconcile with its previous reputation as a serene tourist destination. Human rights organizations have weighed in as well, highlighting concerns about arbitrary arrests, detentions without proper trial, and the use of excessive force during demonstrations. They emphasize that even though the worst of the unrest may be behind the country, the long-term consequences, fear, mistrust, and restricted freedom of expression, are still affecting the population. For international travelers, this raises questions not only about safety, but also about whether they are entering an environment where social interactions are constrained, and where subtle tensions may impact everyday experiences. Travel advisories issued by governments around the world reflect these concerns. Some strongly recommend postponing non-essential travel, citing risks associated with political demonstrations, unpredictable security responses, and the potential for further unrest. Others caution that while popular tourist areas such as national parks and beaches may remain relatively stable, visitors must remain vigilant, avoid crowded public spaces, and keep informed about local developments. These advisories are taken seriously by tour operators, insurers, and individual travelers, many of whom now view Tanzania through a lens of heightened caution. Media coverage has also brought attention to the economic and logistical implications of the unrest. Airlines, hotels, and transportation services are adjusting operations to account for potential disruptions. International travelers are warned that schedules may change at short notice, security checkpoints may delay movement, and local services may operate with reduced capacity. The result is that even a trip planned with the best intentions may require flexibility, patience, and awareness, conditions that some tourists find uncomfortable or discouraging. For journalists and independent observers, Tanzania has become a country under close scrutiny. Stories from the ground often focus on the human impact of the post-election violence. Families still recovering, communities trying to maintain daily life under constant alertness, and citizens who are wary of outsiders due to lingering distrust. These accounts have reinforced the perception abroad that Tanzania is a nation in transition, grappling with deep social and political scars that affect not only its citizens but also the experience of visitors. The combined weight of media reports, travel advisories, and international commentary has made travelers reconsider their plans. Tanzania's beauty and cultural richness remain undeniable, but the country is no longer seen purely as a safe and welcoming destination. The situation has highlighted a reality that travelers cannot ignore. That political instability, even if concentrated in certain areas, can ripple across an entire nation, influencing the logistics, safety, and emotional comfort of anyone visiting at this time. In short, international observers underscore a central point. While Tanzania has extraordinary natural and cultural offerings, the country's current social and political climate demands caution. Travelers are advised to stay informed, respect local sensitivities, and carefully weigh the risks before committing to a visit. For many, the message is clear. Patience may be wiser than impulse, and waiting until the country regains stability is the safest option. For those who were in Tanzania during and after the disputed election, the experience has been a mix of caution, frustration, and sometimes fear. Accounts from travelers, expatriates, and long-term residents paint a vivid picture of a country still grappling with the aftermath of unrest, and the impact on daily life and tourism is palpable. Many travelers describe a sharp contrast between the beauty of Tanzania's landscapes and the tension in its towns and cities. Visitors who came expecting bustling markets, lively streets, and relaxed cultural immersion often found themselves navigating checkpoints, curfews, and unpredictable roadblocks. Even in areas that were not directly affected by protests, the heavy presence of security forces served as a constant reminder that the nation's mood had shifted. One tourist recounted how a routine drive to a safari lodge took several extra hours due to sudden police inspections along the highways, leaving them anxious and uncertain about the journey ahead. Expatriates living in Tanzania have shared similarly cautious perspectives. Families with children have reported keeping routines minimal and avoiding public gatherings. Workplaces have implemented flexible schedules, and daily life has become centered around safety and minimizing exposure to potential unrest. Long-term residents often describe the change as subtle but profound. The easygoing openness that once defined communities has been replaced with quiet vigilance and a tendency to avoid political discussions altogether. Even those who ventured to tourist attractions found that the local guides were more reserved than usual. Guides who normally provide lively commentary and share cultural stories freely became careful in their language, avoiding sensitive topics and focusing strictly on wildlife, landscapes, and history. While this did not necessarily diminish the experience of the destination, it did subtly affect the emotional connection between visitors and locals. The warmth that travelers often remember from previous trips was still there, but it was layered with caution and unspoken tension. Several travelers also reported hearing stories from locals about the unrest that were difficult to verify but nevertheless impactful. From accounts of families displaced by sudden police operations to reports of friends or neighbors arrested during protests, these narratives left visitors with a heightened sense of awareness. Even casual conversations in cafes or hotels carried a layer of gravity, as residents carefully navigated what they could or could not say. Transportation, once a straightforward aspect of travel, became another source of anxiety. Taxis, buses, and shuttle services were operational but often slower, less reliable, and subject to unexpected security interventions. Visitors recounted having to adjust plans at the last minute, sometimes abandoning evening excursions or changing routes to avoid perceived hotspots. In some cases, flights were delayed or rescheduled due to logistical disruptions or crowd control measures, leaving travelers with uncertainty about the continuity of their trips. Expatriates and international staff also noted the emotional weight of living in a country under prolonged tension. Simple daily tasks, shopping, commuting, or interacting with neighbors, required vigilance and a conscious effort to avoid conflicts. Even in neighborhoods far from the centers of unrest, people reported a quiet undercurrent of fear that shaped every decision. For visitors observing these behaviors, it became evident that the post-election events were not just a temporary disruption, but a social phenomenon influencing interactions and the very rhythm of life. These first-hand accounts underline a key truth. For now, Tanzania's political and social climate remains fragile, while the natural beauty and cultural richness of the country continue to draw interest. Travelers cannot ignore the lingering effects of unrest. Personal safety, unpredictability, and the emotional strain on locals all shape the visitor experience in ways that go beyond mere logistics. They redefine what it means to step into Tanzania at this moment. For anyone still considering a trip to Tanzania, understanding the reality on the ground is crucial. The post-election unrest has created an environment where careful planning, vigilance, and awareness of local conditions are more important than ever. Travelers must approach the country with the mindset that things can change quickly, and that even seemingly calm areas may have underlying tensions. Regions to avoid. Urban centers, particularly Dar es Salaam and Mwanza, remain hotspots for demonstrations, security crackdowns, and heightened surveillance. Visitors are strongly advised to steer clear of large gatherings, political rallies, and public squares where tensions could flare unexpectedly. Even smaller towns that were historically peaceful have experienced isolated incidents of unrest, so constant vigilance is recommended. While safari regions and Zanzibar are somewhat removed from the centers of political activity, travelers should still monitor conditions, especially when traveling overland through regions with checkpoints and security patrols. Transportation precautions. Road travel requires extra caution. Expect delays at checkpoints, unexpected roadblocks, and occasional detours due to security operations. Night travel is particularly risky, as curfews may be enforced unpredictably, and visibility is limited in rural areas. Tourists are advised to rely on reputable transport providers and avoid using informal taxi services that may not have up-to-date information on safe routes. Accommodation and safety measures. Select accommodations in areas known to be secure, ideally those that provide 24-hour security and maintain close contact with local authorities. Avoid staying in neighborhoods where unrest has been reported, even if the properties themselves are popular with tourists. It's also wise to register with your embassy or consulate, keeping them informed of your itinerary and maintaining access to emergency contact numbers at all times. Communication and connectivity. Expect that internet access and mobile services may be intermittent. Travelers should plan accordingly by downloading maps offline, having alternative means of communication, and keeping a printed copy of essential addresses and contacts. Staying informed about the local news, curfews, and travel advisories is essential to adjust plans quickly if conditions change. Local interaction guidelines. Be respectful and cautious when discussing politics or recent events. Residents may still feel unsafe expressing their opinions, and even casual questions can be misinterpreted. Observing local customs and avoiding sensitive topics is the best approach. Small gestures of respect and patience go a long way toward building trust in a tense environment. Health and emergency preparedness. The post-election unrest has also affected healthcare accessibility in some regions. Travelers should carry basic medical supplies, ensure they have insurance coverage for emergencies, and identify nearby hospitals or clinics before traveling. In rural areas, services may be limited or delayed due to transportation disruptions or staff shortages. Alternative travel options. For those still determined to visit, consider postponing travel to major urban centers until stability improves. Safaris and controlled private reserves, carefully monitored coastal resorts, and guided tours in quieter regions may still offer a safe and enjoyable experience, but only with proper precautions. Engaging with experienced local guides who understand the current landscape is essential for minimizing risk. In essence, visiting Tanzania now requires a heightened level of awareness, flexibility, and preparedness. The country remains beautiful, and its cultural richness is undiminished. But the shadow of post-election unrest means that what would normally be an adventure can quickly turn stressful or unsafe. Travelers who are willing to respect local sensitivities, avoid hotspots, and take extra safety measures may still have an experience worth remembering, but they must do so with caution, humility, and a clear understanding of the current realities. Tanzania today is a country at a crossroads. The post-election unrest has left deep marks on communities, disrupted everyday life, and reshaped the perception of safety for both locals and visitors. Streets may appear calm, and the landscapes remain breathtaking, but the lingering tension is tangible, and the nation is still navigating the aftermath of a deeply contested election. For travelers, the key takeaway is clear. Now is not the ideal time to visit. Urban centers remain unpredictable, transportation routes can be disrupted, and the emotional climate among locals is cautious and guarded. Even regions typically considered safe, like safari lodges or Zanzibar, are indirectly affected by mainland instability, curfews, and logistical disruptions. Those who insist on visiting must plan meticulously, remain flexible, and prioritize safety above all else. Looking ahead, the hope is that Tanzania will gradually stabilize. Investigations into the post-election violence are ongoing, and political dialogue may eventually restore confidence. Once communities feel secure again and normal social rhythms return, tourism, one of the country's most important economic sectors, is likely to rebound. But until that moment arrives, travelers are strongly advised to monitor developments, follow official advisories, and consider postponing trips to avoid exposing themselves or others to unnecessary risk. The story of Tanzania serves as a reminder that beauty and hospitality can coexist with political and social tension, and that understanding the reality on the ground is essential for responsible travel. While the nation remains rich in culture, wildlife, and landscapes, the current climate requires caution, awareness, and respect for local circumstances. Thank you for watching this video. If you found this story informative and want to stay updated on similar topics, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. We bring you in-depth stories about current events around the world, helping you understand the realities behind the headlines. Stay informed, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.